Hello everyone, my name is Maxwell Walkstetter, and on this pretty dark morning I'm going to share with you some of my research on fungi. So before I get into the meat of my presentation, I'd like to preface my main findings with sort of the background on humans' relationship with fungi. So historically, we know mushrooms are, the main kind of form of fungi that we know and interact with. They're the fruiting bodies, they grow up out of the ground, and they're normally eaten as like a direct source of nutrition. People have been eating them forever, early hominids ate them, they've been around for a really long time. We also use yeasts to make fermented foods. It's been used in a lot of cultures all over the world for a very long time. It just sort of illustrates again how old our relationship with fungi is. It really goes back a long ways. And then other fungi have also been used as medicine in traditionally Asian cultures. A lot of like regions in China or in Siberia, around that area, Southeastern Asia as well. So some examples here of some mushrooms. We have portobello on the left and a shiitake mushroom on the right. And these are good sources of nutrition as a food. For people who are eating these, your ancestors, when they're trying to get nutrition and they're trying to grow their brains, these are a great source of nutrition. But you do have to cook them because if you eat them raw, you can't digest the cell walls and you don't get any of the nutrition. So cooking the mushrooms is actually what releases the nutrition. Next, we have some examples of fermented foods that appear in human culture: wine, bread, soy sauce, cheese, staples of human foods. Quintessential examples of stuff that we make to eat. How long has wine and bread been around? I mean, these are things that Jesus was eating. Super old relationship with fungi. These are some additional fungi. On the left is cordyceps, and then on the right is chaga. The cordyceps is actually an invasive species of fungi. It grows on caterpillars. They sort of invade the caterpillar's body and grow this sort of weird little Cheeto-looking thing out of the top of the caterpillar's head. And in Asia, these are used as a medicine to treat fertility issues in men, actually. And there were some studies on whether or not they actually impact testosterone secretion, and they found in mice it does significantly increase testosterone secretion in cells. So it's a legit fertility supplement. And then on the right, the chaga actually grows here in Alaska pretty frequently. It grows on birch trees. It's also used for medicinal purposes. People like to grind it up into a fine powder and make it into a tea. There isn't a lot of good research on chaga yet, though. It's sort of not been proven yet to have any real medical benefits, but the people who do use it originally were indigenous Siberians, and they thought it treated cancer. That's sort of what the hallmark benefit of chaga is. So we know what our relationship with fungi is. My findings are on what the applications of fungi are. So why do fungi have such interesting applications? What about them makes them so useful in our societies? What character does gives them this quality? And that is biodiversity, which, as it might imply, is diversity of life. So fungi are a super diverse category of living organism. It's been found that there are over 5.1 million species of fungi, and if you imagine a football stadium has about 100,000 seats, that's about 51 football stadiums with a seat for each species of fungi. It's a lot. So this diversity creates a variety of uses and applications for fungi. It's because of just how great the varieties and how far spread they are all over the globe, the way that fungi finds to survive just is so unique that when you observe these things, you see that, hey, this application, this can work somewhere else in a different industry. These things just pop up. And to demonstrate some of the diversity of fungi, I have some just visually interesting kinds of fungi that you don't normally see. This first one here is called Exidia nigricanus. It's called witch's jelly, is the sort of slang name for it. It's sort of this gross looking slime on a tree. It doesn't even really look like a mushroom. Moving on, this one is called Hygnellum pecci. It's called blood tooth fungus. The bleeding tooth fungus, excuse me. It's a pretty nasty looking fungus. You can't eat it. It's super bitter, but it does form symbiotic relationships with trees. It's a pretty nasty looking fungus. All right, now we're getting into the meat of my findings. What are the actual applications of fungi in the real world? And the first one that's been obvious for quite a while is agricultural applications. First one, mycorrhizal networks. So what mycorrhizal networks are is a symbiotic relationship between fungi and the roots of plants. The last part of this word, rhizal, refers to the rhizosphere, which is essentially the area directly around the roots of a plant. Directly, just the soil directly around it, because that's where all the bacteria and just little things live on there. There's a whole, ecosystem going on. So, getting into why the mycorrhizal networks are actually beneficial is they bolster crop yields. When these mycorrhizal networks actually grow and connect plants together, they can exchange nutrients, and they often tend to benefit their own species. We saw this in one of the stimulus articles, I believe. Moving on to the next agricultural benefit is that some strains of fungi act as organic alternatives to pesticides, which is actually pretty significant because a lot of pesticides that we use today, these chemical pesticides, are extremely harsh on whatever land we're using them on. And what you'll have is these mass die-offs of whatever species they're trying to kill. And what happens is these species will eventually evolve to resist the pesticide, and we keep having to find new pesticides and keep destroying, the land around it and keep polluting the environment, and it's really gross. But these fungal pesticides, what they do is essentially, it's a living pesticide. So what it'll do is it'll evolve with whatever you're trying to kill. So if it starts getting the pest, whatever you're trying to kill, ticks, mites, if it starts evolving to resist the fungus can evolve to then resist the pest. One example of this is this strain of fungi, Ovaria bassiana, and it's also an invasive species of fungi like the cordyceps, and it grows on these mites, these arthropod-type looking bugs, and that's why they act as pesticides. Obviously, they invade the bug's body and kill it like that. So, other applications of fungi are bioremediation. You hear about pollution and how bad it affects the planet. So how do we actually fix the land that gets polluted? Well, one way of doing it is called bioremediation. What bioremediation is you take the soil in an area that's been affected by, say, an oil spill or some other form of pollution, and you clean the soil using methods where you either extract the soil, move it somewhere else and clean it there, or use some sort of method that leaves the soil in place and clean it there, where it was from. Now, the current way we do this normally is really expensive and inefficient because you have to take the soil, move it somewhere else, and then you have to clean it with chemicals that end up maybe producing other pollutants as well. So it ends up being sort of counterproductive. Or if they take whatever is polluting the soil and just like incinerate it, that creates pollutants as well. So you're really not getting the full effect of remediating the land because you're producing more pollutants in the process. So there are fungal mechanisms that possess serious potential for bioremediation, and it's only been observed in a certain species of woodrot fungi, and it's a cheaper, more effective, easier way to clean the land that's better than the original way that we clean the land using chemicals, extracting the soil and moving it. And the species that we can use to clean this land is called white rot fungi. It grows on dead trees, it grows in soil, and what it does is the way fungi get food basically is they excrete enzymes. Like if we have stomach enzymes, we eat the food and then it digests in our stomach. What they do is they excrete the enzymes onto whatever they're eating, and it just digests and they sort of absorb it from that way. And the enzymes that these fungi secrete actually break down pollutants in the soil and act as a sort of natural way of cleaning up the environment. I mean, fungi are a part of soil and ecosystems all over the world. So in places where they are polluted, having the fungi in there will essentially help create new networks to support plant growth and really help remediate that land. So concluding, we are just learning the potential benefits of fungi. We're really only catching on to this sort of now. I mean, we've known that they are good for medicine and eating for a long time, but we're only now catching on to things that we can use fungi for in the actual world. New species are discovered all the time as well. It could, next year, the number could be greater than 5.1 million. It really is just a super diverse species that it's just growing all the time. And as research continues, more discoveries can be made, more medical discoveries. I mean, penicillin was sort of the first one, but who knows what other discoveries are out there. Here's my bibliography.
So how did you handle differing perspectives during your research?
The differing perspectives on the applications of fungi are sort of, there are good kinds of fungi and there are bad kinds of fungi. That's sort of the differing perspective. It's not as opinionated of a subject as maybe some other ones are. It's sort of, there are some species of fungi you can eat and that are good for the environment and that you can use for things, and then there are species of fungi that if you eat, you will die. So that it's sort of very black and white in that sense.
If you had more time, what additional research would you conduct?
If I had more time, I would have done more research on fungi used as medicine. I think I wish I could have expanded that to more than just sort of ones that have kind of shaky, the cordyceps had good evidence behind it, but the chaga maybe wasn't the best. I wish I could have done one on some mushrooms that are more, they're being more researched nowadays. There are other kinds of mushrooms that are used for medical purposes that are maybe a little more controversial in some sense, but I didn't really want to include that in my presentation. But if I could go back, I might have included them.